How much do you love nature? Do you remember your first walk in a forest? Your first swim in the ocean? The first time you saw a wild animal? We all love nature. We all depend on nature. More than 40% of the world's oxygen comes from rainforests. 50% of chemical medicines are based on nature. 100% of our food comes from nature. Are we taking this for granted? We need nature to sustain us. IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, is the world's largest global environmental network created in 1948. Together, we're working in more than 160 countries for a just world that values and conserves nature. With over 1,000 staff, more than 1,200 member organizations, including governments and NGOs, and almost 11,000 volunteer scientists and experts. Together, we gather the latest knowledge on biodiversity, assessing the status of species, and protecting our natural wonders. We run hundreds of field projects around the world, such as managing water resources, restoring forests, protecting our coasts and oceans, and helping companies improve their environmental performance. We are nature's voice on the international stage. At the IUCN World Conservation Congress, at the United Nations General Assembly, at international environmental negotiations. By investing in solutions offered by nature, we can address today's global challenges. Together, we can stop the extinction of plants and animals, help fight climate change, restore natural resources, boost food security, and reduce poverty. When nature is healthy, our communities, economies, and countries prosper. Together, let's stand up for nature to create a better future for all of us. Join us now.
Magandang umaga, Pilipinas. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are joining around the world. Welcome to today's webinar where we will try to unlock the key processes and practices under the concept of nature-based solutions. We are streaming to you live through the SEARCA Online Learning and Virtual Engagements Platform, or SOLV, via Zoom and Facebook Live. My name is Kim Bantayan, and I am a program specialist of the Training for Development Unit under the Education and Collective Learning Department of SEARCA. I will be your moderator for this morning's webinar. As you all know, SEARCA is celebrating its 55th anniversary this month of November. Yes, we are 55 years old. And in line with this milestone celebration in the history of SEARCA, we would like to invite everyone to participate in the short survey we are having using the Mentimeter. The question is, in one word, how will you describe SEARCA's role in building institutional capacities and human resources in agricultural and rural development in the Southeast Asian region. I repeat, in one word, how will you describe SEARCA's role in building institutional capacities and human resources on agricultural and rural development in the Southeast Asian region? Send us your thoughts by visiting the link flashed on your screen and in the comment section of Facebook and chat box of Zoom. You may also opt to scan the QR code or go to www.menti.com and enter the code 54136027. I repeat, the code is 54136027. Later, we will look at your responses. So start typing it now. You can type it in the chat box or in the Zoom comment section. Okay, so we will go back to that later before the end of the seminar. So thank you everyone for participating. Moving on, last May 28, 2021, SEARCA signed a memorandum of understanding with the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, or IUCN, to collaborate in areas of common interest, such as education, training, and research. This webinar is the fruit of such partnership. Today's online conversation on nature-based solutions, working with nature to help address some of society's most pressing challenges. We all know that we are up against multiple crises, not just the COVID-19 crisis, but also climate change, forest denudation, biodiversity loss, and a host of other environmental challenges. In today's webinar, our speakers will help unlock one of our most powerful allies, nature. Nature plays a critical role in addressing these environmental challenges. This webinar aims to develop an understanding of key nature-based solutions, concepts, and practices, and provide tools for mainstreaming or strengthening NBS in development projects, as well as in SEARCA's project design, implementation, and monitoring. Let me now go over the program flow, which is currently shown on your screen. After my introduction and a few housekeeping rules, Dr. Glenn B. Gregorio, SEARCA Director, and Dr. Dindo Campilan, IUCN Regional Director for Asia and Director for Oceania Hub, will kick off the webinar with their opening remarks, and welcome all our online participants. This webinar is divided into 3 sessions. The first session will be handled by Mr. Rafael Glamet, Senior Program Officer, Water and Wetland Science and Strategy Group, IUCN Asia Regional Office. Mr. Glamet will give us an introduction to NBS, background, definition, and key examples from Southeast Asia. Session 2 will be handled by Ms. Maeve Nightingale, Senior Program Officer, Asia Regional Coastal and Marine Program, also of IUCN Asia Regional Office. During this session, we will deep dive into the IUCN Global Standard for NBS, the trademark of which is owned by IUCN. Session 3 will deal with case presentations. We have invited 2 case presenters, namely Dr. Andrew Wyatt, Deputy Head of the Indo-Burma Group of IUCN Asia, who will talk about the flood-based agriculture in the Mekong Delta. This will be followed by a presentation on the marshland farming system and its implications to sustain livelihoods and the environment in marshland local communities, the case of Ligawasan Marsh, Maguindanao, Philippines, by Mr. Nasruddin Abdul Kadir Buwisan, a member of the faculty of Cotabato State University, Philippines. The Q&A will follow the case presentations. Dr. Chris M. Orencio, Program Head of SEARCA's Research and Thought Leadership Department, will give the closing remarks and share with us his thoughts and reflection on how SEARCA and IUCN can move forward with nature-based solutions. I know you are all excited to listen to our speakers, but let me first encourage everyone to send us your questions. So how do you do this? For those of you who are tuned in via SEARCA's Facebook page, you may type your questions in the comment section. Kindly indicate your location now and or country of origin. If you are tuned in via Zoom, please post your questions or comments in the Q&A box, which we would find in the menu bar on your screen. Kindly indicate your location and or country of origin as well. Our documentation team will collate, curate, and compile those questions, and I will convey them to our speakers. We hope that we will be able to cover as many questions as we can in the time remaining. Please be clear when you are posing a question to a specific presenter, or if it is a general question that anybody can respond to. We will do our best to answer as many questions as possible during the open forum. Kindly refrain from posting your email address in the comment section. You can provide this information to us upon responding to our evaluation form and e-certificate request. The link will be posted at the end of the webinar. Please note that this webinar will be recorded and will be made available on SEARCA's Facebook page and YouTube channel. Today's presentations will be uploaded on SEARCA's website at www.searca.org. The slides shown during the past webinars that we've had have already been posted there. We would like to encourage our first-time online attendees to please like SEARCA's Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel. By doing so, you will regularly receive updates on our learning events, webinars, and recent publications. For your social media posts, especially on insights or takeaways from this webinar, please use the hashtags flashed on your screen. There are so many of them. So if you have issues also or are experiencing technical difficulties with the Zoom online platform, please contact us at solve@searca.org. So I repeat, please contact us at solve@searca.org if you are experiencing technical difficulties with the Zoom online platform. At this point, allow me to call on our director, Dr. Glenn B. Gregorio, to give us his welcome remarks. Dr. Gregorio is also a professor at the College of Agriculture and Food Sciences, University of the Philippines, Los Baños. He was conferred the rank of academician by the Philippine National Academy of Science and Technology in 2018 and was recently appointed as a UN Food Systems Summit 2021 champion. Ladies and gentlemen, please let us all welcome Dr. Glenn B. Gregorio. Sir Glenn?
Thank you very much, Kim, for that introduction and giving us information about what we will be expecting in the next few hours. Good morning from SEARCA headquarters here at the Spatial Science and Nature City of Los Baños. So I want to emphasize we are at the Spatial Science and Nature City of Los Baños, where science and nature-based solutions must be felt. Are welcome to the seminar on nature-based solutions, working with nature to help address some of the society's most pressing challenges. So in short, I will call it making nature work for human good. So in a layman, that's how we have to use this powerful tool, nature, for our human good. As we accelerate agricultural transformation, the more that we realize the need for sustainable and nature-friendly practices and innovation as we do our things. We have witnessed the combined effects of the pandemic, climate change, and the volatile economy in our food systems. The combinations of these and many other factors, there's really many other factors aside from the major one that I mentioned, made agriculture and rural development more challenging than ever. However, we cannot single out one factor because everything is interconnected. There is a cause and effect cycle which brings us back to how nature works. So it will bring us back to basic, which is the nature. How does the nature will help us work this out? we must learn to look at the macro level while working on the micro level. We are fortunate because today we will learn more about the global standards on nature-based solutions that the International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN, launched last year after a series of consultation and systematic studies. So they made some pilot study on this one and consultation, fine-tuning. Now we are hearing some of the concrete examples of these nature-based solutions. This will be a handy tool and guide us as we conduct and manage our own research activities and projects. However, it must not stop on learning, but most importantly, we must ensure to put these learnings to better use. So some of these are the pilot, then we have to do it in our everyday life, the nature-based solutions in our everyday life. Allow me to extend our gratitude to our partners, especially the IUCN, led by Dr. Dindo Campilan. Thank you for your commitment to promote agricultural sustainability as well as the critical importance of innovation, nature-based innovation. May this not only another seminar or another virtual event, but we hope that the learnings from this dialogue lead us to a better, bigger, and smarter impacts and outcomes for the regions and beyond. Let me take this opportunity, as Kim mentioned to all, that to invite you to join us as we celebrate SEARCA's 55 years anniversary this week with the theme, Sowing Seed of Innovation for Agricultural Transformation. So visit our website or Facebook page for details. We have a lot of activities as we have our celebrations. Again, God bless the nature-based solutions. God bless us all. Thank you. Back to you, Kim.
Thank you for that warm welcome, Sir Glenn. That's a nice hashtag, making nature work for the human good. We are also fortunate to have with us this morning IUCN's Regional Director for Asia and Director for Oceania Hub, Dr. Dindo Campilan. Based in Bangkok, Thailand, he manages IUCN's program and operations in 49 countries and leads a team of nearly 300 experts and support staff members through a network of 11 offices across the region. Prior to IUCN, Dr. Campilan worked with the UN International Labour Organization as Senior Program and Operations Officer for small and medium enterprises, particularly for the UN-wide COVID-19 rapid response and recovery efforts in Myanmar. Dr. Campilan holds a PhD from Wageningen University in the Netherlands. To give us his welcome remarks and an overview of what we should expect from this webinar, ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Dr. Dindo Campilan. Sir Dindo, your message, please.
Thank you, Kim. Good morning. And thank you, Glenn and the SEARCA team. Magandang umaga. Good morning. Sawadee Krap. Now, this is the third in a series of webinars we've actually done with SEARCA since our MOU signing about 5 or 6 months ago. And we are very excited today to learn about nature-based solutions, NBS, working with nature to help address some of society's most pressing challenges. And this is designed by teams from SEARCA and IUCN to provide an overview of the newly launched global standard on NBS. And we're going to learn today what that is all about. 3 important points that we're going to cover in today's webinar. First is the recognition that as the world faces growing challenges from climate to the pandemic, we are also increasingly turning to solutions drawn from nature and working with nature. And we have heard in the past decades approaches such as EBA, landscape approaches, ecosystems framework, and all this have contributed towards building what is now known as NBS, nature-based solutions, not just nature-inspired and not just nature-driven, it's nature-based. IUCN's official definition of NBS includes 3 things. These are actions to protect, sustainably manage, and restore natural or modified ecosystems. This address societal challenges effectively and adaptively, and they simultaneously provide human well-being and biodiversity benefits. Now, as approaches like NBS become popularized and widespread, there is a risk somehow that's involved here. One is it tends to become misused, overused, and it's co-opted, and sometimes it's misunderstood. And we see that in many approaches in sustainable development over the past decades. And so there is a need to establish a global framework as we mainstream NBS. We've also seen this happening in various fields and sectors. And so today is an attempt to explain and to share a common understanding, not only what is NBS, but what is the IUCN global standard on NBS. So as the global authority on nature, IUCN, we have been working on various global standards. You probably heard about a red list for threatened species. We have our green list for conserved and protected areas. Today, we're talking about a standard on nature-based solutions. But what makes it a standard? It has to be three things. It has to be credible, it has to be inclusive, it has to be measurable. So we have brought together the world's leading experts through our global commissions to put together the elements and the ingredients of what would constitute these global standards. We have engaged in a 2-year process of inclusive consultations and diverse contributions from various organizations and individuals around the world. More importantly, we make sure that these are measurable. In other words, there are metrics and tools that we can use to assess and monitor the progress and outcomes in NBS applications. So we have, as a result, the IUCN Global Standard today, and the first ever tool that will help design robust, durable actions for deriving benefits for people and nature. I'm very proud to be joined by my colleagues at IUCN to help explain all of this today. Now, the IUCN standard for NBS was launched in July this year. And so today, we are holding this as a regional forum to be able to look at opportunities within the region, but also to look at similar experiences and hopefully provide a platform for us moving forward in promoting the application of NBS standard in Asia and Oceania and the associated regions. Now, NBS strategies implemented at scale have tremendous potential to address some of Asia's pressing problems, from food security, water security, climate risk, natural disasters, both in the rural and urban context. In practical terms, what do the NBS standards really mean to us joining today? It provides, number one, professional certification for NBS practitioners. As a practitioner, you're able to claim as having been aligned with the standard in the practice of NBS. It provides seal of excellence to organizations, provides quality assurance for programs and projects to implement. When you say you're using NBS, you are using and applying NBS according to the IUCN established global standard. Now, it is also becoming a key reference for governments, for policymakers, and even for donors who look at project proposals, who evaluate and who monitor the implementation of what we do. This is the importance of NBS standard for us and for the community in general. We're also proud that we're not just really here as a bearer of standards. We're here to make sure that we support capacity building, but we also provide continuous backstopping in the implementation of NBS. You probably have heard about the IUCN Academy, and for which we have started to launch the professional trainings, certification trainings on NBS. We look forward to the same platform here in the region that we could establish to support knowledge hubs, but also training organizations to conduct these various trainings. Beyond the training are field implementation initiatives. And I could only think in the Philippines, for example, of how we're starting them. With the Department of Agriculture, we're just putting together a new project around NBS in relation to micro watersheds in Mindanao. We've also been in discussion with DENR with the Biodiversity Management Bureau. And of course, your neighbor, SEARCA in Los Baños, ACB, the ASEAN Center for Biodiversity in relation to Green List. So there are many of these initiatives that we at IUCN are looking forward to support, but also from out of this webinar to increase and widen our partnerships. And I'm really looking forward to those of you who are attending today's webinar to be able to connect with us and together with SEARCA and spread the word about the NBS standard. Thank you again, and looking forward to today's webinar.
Thank you also for that warm welcome, Dr. Campilan, and for setting the pace for this morning's webinar. Moving on to the first session of our online conversation. Our first speaker this morning is the Program Coordinator for Water and Wetlands at the IUCN Asia Regional Office in Bangkok, as well as Regional Focal Point for Nature-Based Solutions, the UNFCCC and the Ramsar Convention. He holds a Master of Science degree in Wetlands Management and Engineering. He has 14 years of experience working on environmental conservation with governments, NGOs, and intergovernmental organizations, covering a range of topics, including water and transboundary cooperation, wetlands management, coastal ecosystems, fisheries, and nature-based solutions for resilience. Here to give us an introduction to nature-based solutions, background, definition, and key examples from Southeast Asia. Please welcome Mr. Rafael Glamet. Rafael, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, Kim. Good morning, and good morning to all the attendees and participants. So indeed, my presentation will cover a little bit of the background of nature-based solution, looking at definitions and also examples at scale before we move to the second session that will explore in more detail what the global standard for NBS is. So I will share my screen from here. I hope it will work. Kindly confirm that you see it.
Yes, Rafael. It's good.
Oh. So starting with the background for NBS. So nature-based solution, first solutions to what? What are the societal challenges that nature-based solution are aiming to tackle? We can classify this societal challenges in several categories, all more or less overlapping and having interaction one with the other. So of course, climate change, looking at the impact of climate change that impacts water, food, and also the occurrence of disaster in the region, food security and water security, human health as well, socioeconomic development, disaster risk reduction, and ecosystem degradation and biodiversity loss. So a number of important challenges that our human societies are facing. You will see a number of quotes here that really capture the importance and the impact of such challenges. So at IUCN and with our partners and members, we believe that nature not only can help, but nature has the solution, or at least a large part of the solution to these societal challenges. And the solution comes from what we can call the ecosystem services, which is a term that was really officialized during the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment in 2005 that really captured and classified and categorized the services that nature is providing to us for free, which I think is an important element to understand. So nature helps us without us even asking, and we've been growing with nature, and the disconnect has only increased societal challenges that we're facing. So what are those ecosystem services provided by nature? The first category is provisioning, which I think is usually the one that we understand the most, how nature provides to us, provides food, provides wood, fiber, fuels, and a number of other services directly to us. The second one that we start understanding as climate change particularly is increasing, and we can really see the impact, is the regulating power of nature. So how ecosystems help us fighting floods, fighting droughts, fighting coastal storms, and a number of other important challenges linked to climate regulation and also helping with water cycle regulation. Another one that is maybe not as obvious and that we often tend to forget are the services linked to cultural services, aesthetic, spiritual, and recreational. For example, a number of wetlands in the region have a strong spiritual meaning for communities, but also recreational and aesthetic value for local communities, but also for tourism. So this is an important service that is often difficult to capture when it's not about tourism. How do you capture the value of the spiritual value of an ecosystem, but these are very important to understand and to also integrate in what we'll see as nature-based solution. And finally, another one that is maybe the most difficult to understand is supporting services. So how some ecosystems will support other ecosystems so they can provide some services. So this is linked to photosynthesis, soil formation, nutrient cycle. So for example, how rivers will feed the coast. So then a number of cycles can happen in marine ecosystems and then support fisheries. So how ecosystems are connected and how impacting one ecosystem will have an impact on other ecosystems and on some cycle. So really ecosystem service is the foundation for our development. And this is how we see the SDGs, for example, at IUCN, but also a number of other organizations, how the SDGs linked to nature and linked to natural resources really underpins the implementation of other SDGs. So this is not a classification per importance. They're all extremely important, but really nature underpins the achievements linked to food and water security, equality, and a number of other SDGs. So this evolution in thinking is not only external to the IUCN, but has been really a process that IUCN went through the past decades. We moved really from an organization looking at safeguarding nature for the sake of saving species, which remains an important pillar of our work, moving to really safeguarding nature to support society and to help society tackling those societal challenges. So most of the conservation organizations have been going through this transformation over the past decades and really looking at how we integrate people and human society within nature and not looking at two different realm or pillars of work. So IUCN has been really the leading organization in mainstreaming, defining, and discussing the term nature-based solution. And this has led to a number of important contributions from our sides, to a number of conference of parties for conferences, the UNFCCC, for example, technical reports, and really two milestones. In 2016, the formal definition of nature-based solution was adopted at IUCN World Conservation Congress. So it was the first time that we had an official definition for nature-based solution. The second milestone is in 2020 with the launch of the NBS standard, which was adopted by IUCN Council and operationalized now by IUCN, and we'll explain it a bit further. So really, we've been helping governments, civil societies, and NGOs in shaping the term nature-based solution, but also shaping the strategy for implementation. So a number of publications which benefited from the support from IUCN or IUCN members and commission members on, again, this idea of shaping nature-based solution. What does it mean? And how can we evolve to a kind of a global framework, which is now materialized with the global standard that we'll see in a few minutes. So moving now to the definition of nature-based solution. So as I said, this definition was officially adopted in 2016 at the World Conservation Congress in Hawaii. And I think Dr. Dindo already presented some key elements, but I'll come back to it because it's very important to understand this definition and to unpack it a little bit. So IUCN defines nature-based solution as actions to protect, sustainably manage, and restore natural modified ecosystems that address societal challenges that we've seen before, effectively and adaptively, simultaneously providing human well-being and biodiversity benefits. So I think two key elements, maybe three, but two very important elements. Nature-based solution is an action to protect, manage, or restore ecosystems. So it's really a volunteer strategy to act on ecosystems, to maintain them or improve them, and really improve or maintain or manage the ecosystem services that we just heard about. The last part of the definition is extremely important as well, and I think this is one of the new things brought by this definition. Nature-based solutions provide human well-being, so they help us tackling some of the societal challenge, but also biodiversity benefits. In previous discussions or draft definition around nature-based solution or ecosystem-based adaptation, it was really about using ecosystem services, but we didn't have really this idea of really making sure that we also get biodiversity benefits. So we give back to nature, we don't only use ecosystem. So it's two very important pillars. The idea of managing effectively and adaptively is also reflected in the standard, and we'll see that later, as nature-based solutions are really living solutions that need to be assessed and adapted as we go. So often we hear, oh, I'm working on ecosystem-based adaptation. Does it mean I'm working on nature-based solution? What are the linkages? Is forest landscape restoration a nature-based solution? So the answer is that nature-based solution is an umbrella term that will include and really capture a number of other more specific terms for specific nature-based solutions. So we have the group of nature-based solutions that looks at ecosystem restoration approaches, for example, forest landscape restoration. Some nature-based solutions are looking at some specific issues. If we look at ecosystem-based adaptation, it's linked to climate change, ecosystem disaster risk reduction with a focus, of course, on disaster risk management and reduction, and a number of others. So nature-based solutions, sometimes actually the term came after some of the more technical terms, but that was an idea of really having a global framework that will capture all those specific approaches. So ecosystem-based adaptation, forest landscape restoration, ecosystem-based management, area-based conservation are all nature-based solutions. What is the scope of nature-based solution? Another important slide. So nature-based solution, if you remember, the definition is really acting on managing, restoring, conserving the ecosystem. So they provide ecosystem services that will help us tackling some of the societal challenges. This must not be mistaken with nature-derived solution and nature-inspired solution. So nature-derived solution, you have here the example of wind power and production of energy, harnessing the power of nature. So nature-derived solution can be understood as using the services, but not acting on the ecosystem. So you will see here, it's about putting the windmill and all technologies to be able to harvest the energy of the wind, of nature, but it's not an action to restore, manage, or conserve an ecosystem. Another category is nature-inspired solution, which is about copying nature. So looking at techniques, technologies, and approaches that are present in nature and ecosystems, and using our own technology to copy that. So often in architecture, linked to cooling buildings or making them more resilient to earthquake and a number of things like that. So nature-derived is using nature, nature-inspired, is copying nature, and nature-based solution is really working with nature and giving back. So this idea of human benefits, but also biodiversity benefits. Important also to understand that nature-based solution is often part of a management strategy that will include a number and a diversity of approaches. So it's not only nature-based solution or grey infrastructure, but often hybrid solutions are found. And this is actually the most common approach. So how we can really mainstream nature-based solution within more traditional approaches that are often grey infrastructure-based. Nature-based solution must be also part of a management strategy that includes political and social options. So an example is on water treatments. So we can see increasingly the use of grey infrastructure, so the cleaning or treatment plants combined with natural infrastructure. So wetlands, natural or created for the purpose of cleaning the water, that acts as a complement and a support to the grey infrastructure. So one more slide that shows how we work on nature-based solution. Because often I think nature-based solution is understood as a very local approach on one specific challenge and on one specific area. We like to see that as really something that can be applied at scale across all sectors, covering a diversity of ecosystem and tackling at the same time a diversity of societal challenges. So you have here on the left an example of a river basin, probably a common example of what we can find now. So a lot of activities, extracting natural resources, mining on the mountain, intensive agriculture, the hydrology that has been changed to kind of maintain and contain the flow and the flood of the river, coastal areas that have been also exploited with degradation of coastal wetlands, islands, reefs, and other ecosystems. So moving to a nature-based solution is really looking at how all the opportunities to restore nature and manage nature at landscape level. So you will see example of forest landscape restoration on the mountain, on the watershed, restoring the river floodplains and wetlands and ensure their management so they can provide the service in terms of water management, buffering the floods and buffering droughts. Looking also at agriscape restoration, how we can mainstream and reinsert the ecosystem within agricultural and productive landscapes. Looking also at urban nature-based solutions, the idea of sponge cities, green areas, and at the coastal level, also ecosystem approach to fisheries management. So really restoring coastal ecosystems so they provide services and support production. So I had a few examples, but I'm afraid I'm already past my time, but just maybe very quickly, key example in the region, in the Asia region. So the forest landscape restoration, we have several examples at scale in several countries, including Pakistan, India, and also China, that have committed through the Bond Challenge, which is a joint initiative of the government of Germany and IUCN to restore large areas of forests. So this has been relatively successful with very large landscapes that have benefited from forest landscape restorations approach, and an important number that the restoration will create approximately 84 billion per year in net benefits that will bring additional income opportunities for rural communities. A number of adaptation projects that are using nature-based solution, looking at coastal resilience, but also restoring wetlands. So they provide this role of buffer for floods and droughts, and also looking at the integration of nature-based solution within transportation infrastructures in Nepal. Nature-based solution for water, an example of China that is looking at protecting the watershed, so designating protected area for the ecosystem services they provide, watersheds close to megacities, so we can ensure a resilient source of water for the population. Also mechanisms around payment for ecosystem services in Bhutan, where the private sector is paying, giving a fee or part of their benefits to local communities for them to manage the watershed and maintain a water production that is then used by hotels and tourism business in Bhutan. And finally, an interesting example, which is not often, maybe not very obvious, is how nature-based solution also supports health. So one of the pioneers on using nature-based solution for health was Australia, with a model on health park and healthy people, where they developed park-based activities for people, building awareness of park, producing evidence of the benefits, and informing cross-sector policies and plans. London's followed Australia lead and really identified that by maybe putting people back to nature, we really save on health and medical costs linked to mental health, and really important benefits we figure here that talk for themselves. In the context of COVID as well, we realized that protecting nature is also making sure that there's a buffer between urban center and some of the possible virus and pandemics. And now looking at building back from the COVID pandemic, how nature is an important pillar of really building back better and supporting local economy. We've seen that during the COVID pandemic, a number of people had to move back to nature, to move to rural jobs and working in farms and going back to fisheries. And we really realized the importance of nature to support us when other businesses and other part of the economy are dying or are stopped. So I think that would be it from my side, and my presentation will be followed by my colleague Mev, who will now dive into the standards, so looking at how we operationalize this definition and how we can support partners in developing and implementing and monitoring large-scale nature-based solution projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Rafael, for giving us a short introduction about nature-based solutions, its scope, and the societal challenges that NBS can address and provide solutions to. Rafael also provided the IUCN definition of NBS, which revolves around these key points: actions to protect, sustainably manage, and restore natural or modified ecosystems that address societal changes and at the same time provide human well-being and biodiversity benefits. Rafael also presented some concrete examples where NBS has been integrated or mainstream in projects and initiatives in forest landscape restoration, water, payment for ecosystem services in Bhutan, and also for human health in the context of COVID-19. Perhaps that could also be another webinar, on how we can mainstream NBS in addressing, in providing solutions to the COVID-19 pandemic. I guess we can work also on that in the near future. Again, thank you, Rafael. We'll talk to you again in the open forum. Our next speaker is currently a senior program officer for the International Union for IUCN Coastal and Marine Program in Asia, and also the IUCN Asia Regional Focal Point for Social and Gender Equity. She has an academic background in marine science, sustainable fisheries management, and aquaculture, and has 24 years of international experience working with international development organizations, mainly in Asia. Her work focuses specifically on addressing, as part of her role, our speaker has been leading the IUCN regional program on work related to integrated coastal management, marine spatial planning policy and practice, marine protected areas management, resilient coastal communities and livelihoods development, blue carbon, and marine plastic pollution. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Ms. Maeve Nightingale, who will discuss the IUCN Global Standards for NBS. Maeve, the screen is yours.
Thank you. So this next session will take us through an exploration of the standards criteria. We'll take a look at the structure of the standard and the criteria involved in the standard. Rafael has earlier expressed to us the definition of nature-based solutions, the IUCN definition that nature-based solutions are actions to protect, sustainably manage and restore natural or modified ecosystems that address societal challenges, effectively, adaptively, and simultaneously provide human well-being and biodiversity benefits. So this global standard is designed around 8 key criteria. It's a standard which is used to facilitate the design, verification, and scaling of nature-based solutions. And it's based on a large body of knowledge and co-creation process to reach what we have today. And that's including community of conservation scientists, practitioners, social scientists, and taking also from traditional knowledge. So in a way, it's been developed through a sort of crowdsourcing approach and has been through many iterations and drafts in consultation with scientists, with users, and we've done this through online systems for input by various stakeholders. So Rafael, in his presentation, explained that one of the central key parts of a nature-based solution is that it addresses societal challenges. And he has talked in some detail about what we mean by societal challenges: climate change, disaster risk reduction needs, requirements, societal benefits in general in terms of sustainable development. So that's the first criteria. The second criteria is that a nature-based solution will be designed at scale. In all our projects, of course, we're operating at one scale, but we are working within connected social ecological systems. Criteria 3, 4, and 5 are the main pillars for sustainability, sustainable development planning, and we'll talk about those in more detail in a moment. Then we have 6, which is about looking at the trade-offs and relating to multiple benefits from nature-based solutions that evolve over time, and the need for equity in benefit sharing as trade-offs and understanding trade-offs as they arise. And criteria 7 is that adaptive management, recognizing that no system is static, and that whatever management interventions that we're working on needs to be reviewed for its outcome and benefits and modified accordingly. And finally, criteria 8, and this is just a snapshot. These are eight criteria in a snapshot. 8 looks at the sustainability of the solution and how it's mainstreamed in terms of policy and practice, replicability and scalability. So that's just in a snapshot, the 8 criteria that make up the standard. And each of these criteria are supported by indicators. There are 28 indicators in total covering across those 8 criteria. And this next section of the session, we will just dive a little bit into what we mean by a number of those different 8 criteria. We won't have time to go in depth into all 8, but I will select a few of them where we can get a taste or a feel for the different indicators that support those criteria. We start with criteria number 1, which I think is very, very clear to all of us working in the field of science and sustainable development, that the NBS effectively addresses societal challenges. The second criteria, if we could take a little dive here, is that we want to design at scale. Nature-based solutions recognize this social ecological systems thinking, that economy, society, and ecosystems are integrally connected with each other, and therefore a need for an integrated approach in management thinking across sectors is essential, that whereby one nature-based solution may be operating at a single scale, that outside that operational boundary, the ecosystems are connected, and so what's happening outside and within are influencing each other. So the need to work at within a certain scale, but be aware of the connectivity across the systems. Criteria number 3 requires that we demonstrate biodiversity net gain in a nature-based solution. And this is actions that directly respond to evidence-based assessments of the current state of ecosystems and the prevailing drivers of degradation and loss. So we're looking at nature-based solutions that are designed specifically within mind the drivers of change within that system. So this calls for situation analysis to be available, that there's a clear understanding of the drivers of change, and that the nature-based solution is incorporating that understanding and addressing those drivers of change. So over time, we would expect to see that biodiversity net gain is measurable. We have measurable outcomes in terms of biodiversity, and that biodiversity is being enhanced. So in degraded systems, that there's an improvement in the quality, and that the connectivity between systems and ecosystems to increase the resilience and robustness of ecosystems is also part of the thinking. And we want to just maintain the understanding that newly restored or newly developed systems, as opposed to mature systems, have far less ecosystem service potential. And so we need to recognize that the protection of mature systems versus the restoration of younger systems is intrinsic in the understanding. Criteria number 4 looks at economic viability. And this is really key. Many of those ecosystem services that Raphael was discussing earlier are very, very difficult to monetize. And so often we look at that we're often needing to explain return on investment concepts. So if I restore a forest, how is that going to in what time period will we see a return on investment? And how do we quantify that in economic terms? So economic viability of a nature-based solution often needs to be demonstrated upfront, particularly in those cases where we're dealing with, for example, disaster risk management being very much great infrastructure protection thinking in terms of investment. So when we're looking at more of the hybrid nature-based solutions, we see a lot of these in flood risk management, for example. How do we weigh up the pros and cons of the nature-based solution versus a gray infrastructure solution, and maybe hybrid of different integrated types of solutions as well? So the economic viability of the nature-based solution needs to be demonstrated, and this is a tricky criteria to meet. Criteria number 5, the third sustainable development pillar of these criteria, involves inclusive governance. And I think we're all pretty familiar with what we mean here. It's taking the human rights-based approach to governance, ensuring that participatory, inclusive planning and design of projects has been taken into account, and is a real, genuine process. And it ensures that governance mechanisms are in place as a way of making decisions over time. Criteria number 6 looks at balanced trade-offs, and this is really the understanding that over time there will be multiple benefits generated by a nature-based solution. So the restoration of fisheries, the restoration of forestry, for example, forestry productive systems, starts to change and shift the interests and the power balances often. So the idea is that this trade-off, the balance in trade-offs, is reviewed over time, that the costs and benefits and the risks are well understood, and that the benefits are equitably shared from the beginning and over time as the assets and resource base changes. Criteria number 7 looks at adaptive management. I think this is something we're all familiar with. We recognize that systems are not static, that over time we need a strategy to regularly monitor and understand and evaluate the intervention and make adjustments accordingly. And this is important in terms of like basic life cycle planning and management, and that it's essential to build in that iterative learning process, that we're revising plans, we're adapting where necessary based on the outcomes that we're seeing through good monitoring. And the final criteria is on the sustainability and mainstreaming. We need to see that, that over time the solutions are continue to be supported in policy, are taken up in policy, are promoted and scaled up and protected through policy mechanisms and through clear understanding and knowledge generated from the nature-based solutions at the local level. That allows them to be replicated and seen as best practice. So the next section just looks really at the mechanics of how to use the IUCN global standard. What does the tool look like? If you're a practitioner interested in understanding whether or not your intervention could be considered a nature-based solution, then this tool is something that you will be interested in. So the tool is essentially comes in the form of an Excel spreadsheet. We will give you the link as to where you can access that. Once you open the Excel spreadsheet, you will see a single tab for each of the 8 criteria. And under each of the criteria, when you open it, you will find clear description of the indicators and some guiding questions that allows you to start the thinking and evaluation of the particular intervention that you're looking at. And these questions will help you understand how closely your meeting or the project or intervention is able to meet the NBS criteria. And we do that using a traffic light system. So if we just take this example from criteria 3, net biodiversity gain, you will see that this criteria here is indicator, we're showing indicator 3.1, which is the NBS action directly responds to an evidence-based assessment of the current state of the ecosystem and prevailing drivers of degradation and loss. This is what I was referring to earlier. We're looking for presence or absence of a situational analysis on which the nature-based solutions are designed and responding to drivers of change. And so in this case, if you have a strong updated assessment of the current status of the ecosystems, then you would err on the left-hand side there, the strong or the green. If on the other hand, alternative extreme, there is no real clear assessment information available about that ecosystem, then we would be in the red section, insufficient, or maybe we have data which is within 10 years old, but has not been validated for a long time, in which case you're looking at more sort of orange, or adequate, where you may have some data, it's been collected within in the last 10 years, and it has been validated to an extent as a part of designing the nature-based solution, influencing the design of the nature-based solution. So you can see a sort of simple traffic light system. So you would go through each of the criteria, each of the indicators, supported by the guide questions, and those that have been working on the initiative should be able to objectively answer and fit themselves into an understanding of how they rate within each indicator from green to red. At the end of that process, when you go to the final tab, the information and data is collated, and in effect, you get a summary score, which is based on the integrated score, based on the scores of each of the criteria. And this sort of spiderweb diagram that shows very clearly where the gaps and where the strengths remain. So if the overall score for each of your criteria is 0.5, then you're seeing, you confidently can say that the criterion has been met, but it can be improved. If you're even stronger and you've got, say, 0.8, then there's strong adherence to the criteria and you're doing very, very well. If your score, however, is, say, 0.3 or under, then those are what would be indicated as the orange or the red, and those would be the areas to continue to work on, to do a deeper dive, a deeper analysis in terms of how that aspect of the solution, nature-based solution, could be strengthened. Okay, we can talk more about that. So the standard overall is governed, if you like, by the International Standards Committee. They're responsible for the oversight and safeguarding and the revision of the standard over time. This is advised by the scientific committee, of which IUCN, of course, has a number of different scientific networks within which we work, and our partners. We encourage the use and practice of the standards. So on the right there, we're encouraging as many different organizations and entities to take up the use of this tool and to provide their feedback and become part of the development process for improving the standard. And we now see in the Asia region a number of different points of interest in terms of setting up regional hubs for capacity building and the adaptation of the standard for specific contexts within this region. And very shortly, one of the first hubs for NBS in Asia will be established in China. This slide provides you with a number of different materials and resources that will allow you to access all you need to know about the nature-based solution standard, and direct access to the self-assessment sheet, which I have just described to you. It's free and open to anybody who is interested in trying that. So I would encourage anybody who would like to just have a deeper dive to go and look at that link, and provide your feedback and insights that you have come up with in terms of your own application of that. And this is also provides you with information where you can link with other groups using the tool and register yourselves as users of the tool. So we can sort of create this community of practice and network across the globe in terms of IUCN NBS standard. Thank you.
Kim, I think you are muted. Yes.
Yep. Sorry. Thank you, May, for presenting and deepening our understanding of the IUCN global standards to facilitate NBS, which is, as you said, it is designed around 8 criteria that make up these standards. How to use the NBS tool, which and what it looks like when we want to evaluate whether an initiative has met the criteria or not, which really entails deep diving into each criteria. Thank you also for sharing with us the links to NBS resources and materials. Your PowerPoint presentation will be uploaded in our website, so our online attendees can access these links through our website later. Okay, so again, we encourage our audience watching the webinar via Facebook Live to please start typing your questions in the comment section, including your location or country of origin. If you are tuned in via Zoom, please post your questions in the Q&A box, which you will find in the menu bar on your screen. Again, may I remind everyone to please refrain from posting your email address in the comments section. Moving on to session 3, the last session of this webinar, our first case presenter has been IUCN's Mekong Delta Program Manager, overseeing the implementation of IUCN's major projects in the Mekong Delta since 2013. In 2019, he was assigned an additional regional role as deputy head of IUCN's Indo-Burma Group, supporting IUCN's Cambodian and Laos program. Andrew's current work is focused largely on nature-based solutions and climate change adaptation in large agricultural landscapes and river deltas. Here to share with us how flood-based agriculture, or FBA, as a nature-based solution effectively addresses one or more societal challenges in the Upper Melka Delta floodplain in Vietnam. Please welcome Dr. Andrew Wyatt. Over to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Kim. Am I coming through clearly?
Yes, Andrew, yes, you are.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Let me share the screen here. Okay, is the screen coming through clearly now?
Yep. Just put it in presentation mode.
Okay.
Yeah, okay now. Thank you.
Right, this is, I've only got 15 minutes for this presentation, and normally I have a larger presentation to go through all the criteria of the nature-based solution standard. But I won't have time to go through all the criteria, so I've got a cut-down presentation here. It's a case study we often, we've presented recently at the IUCN Academy to back up the training on nature-based solutions. So this initiative of IUCN in the Mekong Delta represents almost a decade's worth of work and collaboration with multiple development partners, including the Dutch, the World Bank, GIZ, and so on. So it's not only the work of IUCN here. Let me just slides. Start with the problem analysis, if you like, where we started together with other development partners in this initiative. And that was our joint concerns over the loss of the floodplains from polder building or high-back building. I guess it has its roots in the Green Revolution, which did amazing things for the world and for Vietnam to develop rice growing technologies, for example, rice varieties that now today have allowed rice farmers to grow up to 3.5 crops per year. So to really intensify rice growing. And to do that in river deltas, of course, you have to deal with the seasonal floodpots or the floods. that arrive on a seasonal basis. What I've got, I'm showing here a couple of remote sensing images between the two last extreme floods in the Mekong Delta, year 2000, top right-hand corner, and year 2011 in the bottom, on the bottom of the screen. And in that decade, what you can see is some green patches appearing in the floodplain area, which is represented by the blue color in those remote sensing images. And if you are to go on the ground and to see what those green patches look like, you can see it in the top right-hand photo, which shows the Vietnamese third rice crop displacing the floods. And you can see over the border, so this picture is taken at the Vietnam-Cambodia border. Over the border in Cambodia, you can actually see the natural flood that occurs between May, June until November in every year. That photo on the top left, that's taken at the height, at the peak of the floods, and that is around about October, beginning and middle of October. That's the scene you will see at the Vietnam-Cambodia border. Now, if you look at that picture of the Vietnamese third rice crop, you coming from different disciplines, you'll ask many different questions. If you're coming from an ecology, you'll be asking, well, what's happened to all the aquatic habitat that used to be a habitat for fish species and other aquatic species? If you're a geomorphologist, fluvial morphologist, you'll be asking questions about, oh, what's happened to the sediment that's normally transported with the flood? And what does that do in terms of natural replenishment of, to compensate for the natural subsidence that occurs in wetland areas. And if you're coming from a agronomist perspective, you'll be asking questions about, well, what's happened to all the nutrients that are normally carried with the floods in the sediments? And what does that do for the profitability of the third rice crop that is grown without those nutrients? So these are that's just some of my, the kind of concerns that we have. And here's some quantification of this. These are the, I've listed here some of the societal problems, challenges that we face in the Upper Mekong Delta floodplain. We've lost almost, over half of the floodplain area today. And that area in blue on the Vietnamese side of the border is about 1.4 million hectares. Now that displacement of that flood in 2011 actually caused an additional $3 to $11 million of additional flood damages in the Mekong Delta's largest city, Cần City, which is downstream of that flood area. We've lost fisheries value of approximately $1,000 per hectare per year. We've lost $15 million per year of free fertilization. And we're having subsidence of around about 5 to 10 millimeters per year. We also see an increasing accumulation of persistent organic pollutants, pesticides in the ecosystems documented by this USGS piece of research. And finally, we've also seen increasing social inequality over time. That graph on the right-hand side shows some data between the top quintile and the bottom quintile over time as rice prices have declined, increasing inputs like fertilizer and pesticides are required, and we've lost the wild capture fishery as well. So I'm here to talk about flood-based agriculture as an alternative. So how does flood-based agriculture address these societal challenges? Well, fortunately, our research and others' research have shown that wetland agricultural crops can actually deliver 1.5 to 5 times more profitability than intensive rice cropping. And I'm a co-author in that publication on the right-hand side, which was published in the journal Environmental Management 2018, which is a paper questioning the triple rice intensification of the Vietnamese Mekong Delta. And the data that we collected at that time is published in this document. But by adopting flood-based agriculture, what we can also do is restore a number of floodplain ecosystem functions, and that is the flood absorption area to reduce flood disasters. We can arrest subsidence. We can conserve and restore aquatic habitat and biodiversity if we were able to restore that lost floodplain area. And we can also conserve and restore aquifer recharge area, an issue that's becoming increasingly important as we realize that we're depleting the groundwater aquifers up to an unsustainable level. And finally, we've also seen evidence that breaking the third rice crop, breaking the cropping cycle also helps to break pest cycles, which we believe will reduce pesticide use as well. This is some of the data that was published in the paper I referred to. The highlighted blue areas are the flood-based crops. The yellow highlights there are the mono rice crops. This top data here is from the low dike area. So you can see the yellow there is only they're growing only 2 rice crops per year. And you can see the profits, the right-hand column here, are almost all of them are higher than the profits generated from 2 rice crops per year. And if you look at the third rice crop data, which is in the bottom part of that table, the 2 yellow highlights there, you'll see that the triple rice crop profits are even lower. And that's the result of the higher input costs and the low fertility in these dikes. And what's interesting is we've got data here comparing the 5-year dike to a 15-year dike, and you can see the profits from a 15-year dike is even lower than a 5-year triple rice crop in a 5-year dike. What do these flood-based agriculture models look like? Well, here I'm just showing you a number of systems that we have documented. We have rice aquaculture systems, lotus farming systems, floating rice upland crop systems, and Melaleuca timber plantations. These are models that are grown in the low dike areas. In other words, there's still partial flood area left in these areas. The more challenging area to restore the floods is inside the high dikes. And on the right-hand side, you see some examples there where we can do intensive lotus inside high dikes, floating crops like water caltrops. And recently, we've also tested ideas from Bangladesh in terms of floating vegetable gardens. They still require further development and their profitability is still questionable. One of the biggest questions we get asked is regarding upscaling of these models is markets. And it's a valid question because if we're trying to replace the third rice crop, for example, the rice markets are much bigger, global markets. However, plant-based crops produce products that have much smaller markets. But let me just show you an example of markets for lotus as an example. Often flood-based crops are very diversified, both in their cropping systems. There are rice aquaculture systems, and in these systems, we actually can do a flood-based crop like lotus with aquaculture. But just taking lotus on its own many of you may know, in fact, in Asia especially, that they use in food markets, various parts of the plant, the seeds, the stem, shoots, and the roots are used in the food markets. And you can see more and more of this coming to supermarket shelves. They're used in traditional medicine markets. That's the longest established markets for them. They're used in flower markets and ecotourism markets here in the Delta. And very, very, very recently, we've developed a fiber market for them from a cottage industry and yet undeveloped use of the mature stems. We think we can produce packaging material and so on, like cardboards and so on. But there's some examples of photos from a recent initiative there producing high-value lotus fabric as a cottage industry in the Mekong Delta, which is just starting out. And here are some pictures from one of our IUCN members who introduced training and conducted training and introduced the knowledge to local women in the Mekong Delta. Okay, in terms of upscaling, what's the potential? We've been working with the World Bank and the Ministry of Agriculture to develop a green climate fund project to look at potential upscaling. And in this case, we've identified together with the provinces through consultations and that there's potential to upscale flood-based agriculture to conserve around about 17,000 hectares, but more importantly, to restore around about 42,000 hectares. And in this project, we also hope by breaking the pest cycles, we can clean up the dry season rice cropping, shifting around about 96,000 hectares to organic practice. And most importantly, investments in the value chain to value add to the crops, to develop new markets and value adding investments to the crops. Okay, I'll finish up there. My time's up. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Andrew, for sharing with us IUCN's initiative to restore the ecosystems functions of the upper Mekong Delta floodplain in Vietnam through flood-based agriculture, demonstrating to us how it has improved the economic well-being of the farmers and also the beneficiaries of this project. Our next, we'll get back to you, Sir Andrew. Our next case presenter is Mr. Nasruddin Abdul Kadir Buwisan, or Mr. Nas. Mr. Buwisan is a licensed agriculturist and an environmental planner. He is currently serving as faculty of the College of Agriculture and Fisheries in Cotabato State University. Prior to this current teaching job, he served as community development worker for several non-government organizations. His research interests include local economic development, marshland farming, farming system, and Islamic microfinancing. Mr. Buwisan is a fellow of SEARCA, participating youth of SHIP for Southeast Asian Youth Program, and an alumna of the Congressional Internship Program for Young Mindanao Leaders. Mr. Buwisan holds a bachelor's degree in agribusiness management, and he has completed a Master of Science in Farming System. Here to tell us more about the marshland farming system and its implications to sustain livelihoods and the environment in marshland local communities. The case of Ligwasan Marsh, Maguindanao, Philippines. Please welcome Mr. Nas Buwisan. Sir, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And good morning. My appreciation to SEARCA for having me on this very important event for nature-based solutions. Thank you, Dr. Glenn. Please allow me to present my topic centered to the marshland farming system and its implications to sustain livelihood and the environment in marshland local communities. The case of Ligwasan Marsh, this is in Philippines. Liguasan Mars is one of the most important natural resource in Mindanao. It has been the source of food for decades through farming and fishing. Despite this, there have been no comprehensive efforts to study the Mars. Policies and programs for its protection and development is still limited. Farming in a marshland community is very vulnerable that affects not only the crops planted but the whole community. Farmers complain about crops due to flooding, and we believe that productive, profitable, and sustainable farming in the Mars is possible if only enough information is available. Producing food with nature can be sustainable. This study explored the practices of farmers, whether these are sustainable in terms of agroecological, socio-territorial, and economic sustainability. This undertaking also exerted effort to design and improve a sustainable farming system suitable in a marshland community. This research project used both the qualitative design using a participatory approach and the quantitative design. Triangulation method was applied. We have interview method, observation, focus group discussions, and document review. There were 24 regular farmers participated. Water and soil laboratory testing were conducted. Farm trials were implemented. There were also water level monitoring using locally device monitoring device. The study was conducted in Puned, Kabuntalan in one of the communities along Liguasan Mars. In terms of the profile of households, as you can see in the graph, the level of education in terms of formal education, both the respondents and the other household members is very low. Only 45.83% have reached elementary for the respondent, and this is for the whole other household members, 39.77. There are still a large number, 25% from the respondents who were not formally educated, and this is 10.23% among other household members. In terms of household assets and farm animals owned, around 75% have cattle and goat. There were 83% who have chicken, 54% have carabao, and 37.50% have duck. Assets, the ownership of the farm households is very limited, but 91.67% having mobile phones, tables for 70.83%. As you can see in the diagram, not all of the household members own basic household assets. As you can see in the graph, the planting calendar of the farm households in the water level monitoring we have. Rice farming started in January until October, but when you refer at the water level monitoring, the flooding started in June, meaning the rice were flooded starting June until October. Although there are still rice which were harvested until August, but these were totally damaged in October. So as you can see, generally, there are farms which were damaged due to flooding which started in June 2020. In terms of economic activities, there is high percentage of farmers who are into rice farming. 75%. This is followed by coconut farming, vegetable farming, banana, corn. But in terms of average income per farmer, as you can see in the graph, the highest is from duck placing, which is 40,605. But this is only 12.5% of the farm households are engaged in duck raising. Compared to rice and coconut farming, rice farming, on which 75% of the farmers are planting rice, only 11,936 pesos is earned annually. In terms of off-farm income, 33.33% or one-third of the farm households are employed, but this is basic employment at the barangay local government unit. Other off-farm income, mini groceries, driving motorcycle, carpentry, and OFW remittances. But in terms of average income per household, highest is on establishing of mini groceries, or what we call here in the Philippines sari-sari store. When we try to check the yield gap, the productivity of marshland farming, we found out that the potential yield, the actual yield does not meet the potential yield of the varieties they are planting. For example, for rice, the potential yield for rice is 3.54 tons, but the yield in the research area is only 1.57, or there is a yield gap of 1.97. In terms of corn, only 0.78 is the average production per hectare, but the potential yield of the variety they are using is 2.45. In terms of mung bean, 0.32 ton per hectare, and the potential yield is 0.72. But although the yield is low, we found out that the profit of the farmers is high because they are using minimal fertilizer, or many of them do not even use fertilizer, and that many of the labor is being provided by the farm household. So generally, the production cost is very low. Although the yield is low, the production cost is also low, which make the farmers having a higher profit. The sustainable marshland farming practices. Farmers use minimum tillage practices. Farmers would prepare the land immediately after the flood water subsided because they need to plant immediately because they do not want the flood again to come back and can damage their crops. There was no cultivation using plow or other tools. Some farmers do manual weeding, and many farmers also do not use fertilizer. During harvest, farmers also use simple tools such as sickle and langgaman. Crop protection is also being practiced in the community, and this can be among the reasons why the soil is still fertile and pest infestation is rare. They rotate the planting of rice and corn or rice and mung bean depending on the availability of the farmland and the level of water in the marsh. During flood or wet season, farmers planted rice while corn and mung beans was usually planted during dry season. We had soil laboratory analysis, and we found out we tested first in December 2019. This is before the flooding, and we tested again in 2020 after flooding. We found out that the general observation, the trend is that in terms of soil pH, the soil pH of the different sample sites we have is the trend is moving to neutral pH. In terms of organic matter, there was an increase in organic matter content. In terms of available N, there was increase in available nitrogen, but there was a decrease in available phosphorus, but increase also in terms of exchangeable potassium. We then theorized that the flooding, the occasional flooding in the farm areas recharges the soil nutrients available in the farm. We checked the sustainability of the marshland farming system using the IDEA method and modified the method based on the ecosystem and based on the practices of farmers. As you can see in the polygon, lowest scores are on the agroecological sustainability. This is in terms of farming practices, organization of space, and diversity. Highest are on the economic sustainability, such as efficiency, independence, and economic viability. As you can see in the right graph, highest on economic sustainability, which is 84.50, and this is categorized as very sustainable. In terms of socio-territorial sustainability, it is 83.17 or moderately sustainable. This is the same with agroecological sustainability. Overall, the sustainability of marshland farms is moderately sustainable. We had a farm trial after the assessment that we have, the farm system assessment. We tried to try the suggestion of the farmers that they need to have vegetable garden. They need support for their vegetable gardening, for their duck raising, and for their fishing. And we are showing you here the result of the support to duck raising. There was a one-day training conducted during the start of flooding season. This is related on duck raising. Then the first batch received 142 ducks, while the second batch received 240 ducks. In total, there were 25 farmers who were provided with ducks and feeds. The ducks provided all in their mature states, meaning ready to lay eggs. And this is the result. It has provided additional income to farmers. From July to December, farmers had difficulty in looking for source of income due to community quarantine and flooding, and the income from duck raising saved those beneficiaries. On average, each female duck had laid 69 eggs and are reportedly continuing to lay eggs using only the natural feeds available. Income was used for other economic activities. Our conclusions and recommendations. The farmers' traditional farming method has made their farming activity more resilient from external shocks, provided less negative effect for the environment. Farms have been found to be generally fertile based on the perceptions of the farmers and the laboratory two tests we had. Farming in marshland areas is considered limited resource farming, and the initial intervention has increased the resiliency of the farmers from flooding and from even the COVID-19 pandemic. Marshland farming in PNUD is classified as moderately sustainable. The marshland farming system in PNUD proved that it is possible to find strategies that would provide agricultural benefits without harming the marshland ecosystem. We recommend that there is a need to explore the planting of other crops because of the fertility of the soil, optimizing duck raising and continuing vegetable gardening. There should be information and education campaigns to farmers on the importance of the marsh and how this can be protected. Likewise, marsh-wide studies should be initiated by our region or the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, including studies on biodiversity, ecosystem evaluation, or protected area suitability assessment. Thank you very much, and good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Buwizan, for sharing with us the results of your study on the farmers' traditional farming method in Liguasan Marsh. Mr. Buwizan's study finds that the traditional method of farming has made farming activity in his area more resilient to external shocks and provided less negative effect on the environment. Okay, so that ends the session 3, the case presentation. So may I now call on Rafael or Maeve for their comments or perhaps additional insights in the cases that have just been presented. Any thoughts? Any reflection? Rafael or Maeve?
Thank you. Thank you to Dr. Nas and also to our colleague Andrew for this presentation. So they show the interaction between agricultural productive landscape and really the need to preserve some of the natural cycles linked to, in this case, in both cases, flood pulse and flood systems. Maybe a first question to Dr. Naz. I think that was a great presentation that really shows how those traditional practices are resilient and build on again a natural flood cycle. I was wondering, in the idea, if you come back to the definition of nature-based solution, we're really looking at human benefits, which I think are very clear in this case, but also in terms of biodiversity benefits. So do you also have some kind of monitoring of biodiversity baseline on biodiversity and monitoring system to evidence some of the positive outcome in terms of biodiversity conservation or restoration?
Yes, as part of this study, we found out, though we cannot directly link it to the farming activity, we found out that there were loss of bird species, fish species, and several plant species. There were loss of biodiversity. We found it as part of the study, but we cannot directly link it to the marshland farming practices in the community. We checked the water in the marsh, and we found out that the different parameters are still within the boundary of the Environment Bureau or Environment Agency. So we think that the loss of the fish species, for example, cannot be directly linked with the farming activity, at least in the community. But the loss of some bird species can be attributed with the community, because some of the community are practicing catching wild birds because this is for their survival, and these are the our findings related to biodiversity.
Thank you. Maybe just another question before I hand it over to Mev for comments. So I understand this system is resilient, but also can be vulnerable to some external factors, right? Or how the watershed is managed, or the water sources. Also climate change that probably can have an impact on the water level. So how are you factoring all these factors that are a bit, external or bigger than the site, I would say, and just linking that to the idea of looking at the right scale that was presented in the standard, and really factoring elements like climate change that in the long term can affect this system or practices?
Yeah, generally there was no actually effort, or there were less effort in terms of conserving the marsh, at least in the community, the research area. Personally, it was observed that some of the plant species are now gone. The shrubs in the swamp mangroves in the community is not anymore visible. There are limited programs and limited policies that would protect actually the marsh. That is why if you look at the also the studies related to the marsh, there are limited studies related to Liguasan marsh. That's why we recommend further studies in terms of protecting the marsh, the valuation, ecosystem valuation. And I hope the IUCN and the SEARCA can still help us in conserving and protecting and developing the Liguasan marsh. This is a one of a kind study, and one of the first studies that I hope we can continue to work with. We can continue for the protection of the marsh.
Sure, we'll be happy to discuss that further after the meeting if you want to. Maybe Mev, do you have comments?
Yeah, sure. And yeah, just touching on that case study as well from Liguasan Marsh. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. We already see such interesting evidence there of what you have already been monitoring on livelihoods, production systems, and of course the societal benefits. It's also an interesting case study because it highlights what we know as practitioners in conservation and sustainable development. The traditional practices need to be preserved and scaled And so I just want to take a moment to relate that to how we would use the NBS standard. So there in criteria 2, we talk about designing at scale. And what you have here is such a beautiful case study of the benefits of traditional farming practices and the need to preserve them. And of course, we know that many of these traditional systems are in danger because of what's going on outside at the boundary of these systems. And you've made reference already to the need to scale up and influence the broader conservation of the marsh as a whole. So the entire system of the marsh system and the land surrounding the marsh area. And so my laptop just crashed.
Oh, but we can still hear you.
Okay, sorry.
More video. Can you switch the video to Mev? Right.
Where are we? So I'm thinking, when you take criteria 2, which is like designing at scale, which means, how would we promote the understanding and knowledge from this case that you've presented with the policymakers that influence decisions that are made in the broader land use planning within that area. And then criteria number 8, which looks at that whole concept of sustainability and mainstreaming, which is ensuring that this knowledge and evidence base that you have great quantitative evidence there, is shared broadly with local policymakers and even provincial, subnational policymakers, and then of course ultimately national policymakers, that we have a case in hand to argue for the use of traditional practices in landscape planning systems. Yeah, I think just wanted to sort of pull out those 2 criteria and express how we would connect your case in terms of some of those criteria that are very relevant. And also, it would be so interesting just to have an experiment on using that tool. I see that you've already collected so much of the information that are relevant to answering some of those questions in the guide questions for the criteria. It would be very interesting just to see how we could apply that. I'd be interested to look into that. On the case with Andrew, of course, and this relates to the question in the Q&A as well. We have applied the MBS standard to looking at the case study. And that's, a case, as Andrew has mentioned, that we've been working on with partners for over a decade, over 15 years. And still today we find, and many of the cases that we do analyze, that the long-term monitoring of biodiversity, and we know ecosystems change over time, and it takes many, many years for us to see the true fruition of an intervention that has happened, is still one of the weaknesses. And so again, it just raises that interest to ensure that when we're designing initiatives that we do plan for and resource long-term monitoring for biodiversity, and it doesn't have to be complex, but select key biodiversity indicator species or other parameters are really, really important for us to be able to really have a robust NBS demonstrated. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maeve and Rafael. Just please allow me to read some of the comments in the chat box from from Dr. Julian Gonsalves. He said, Ralph and Maeve, you have both helped elevate the understanding of nature-based solutions, concepts, scope, standards, and mechanisms, indicators, standards, impressive, deepened discussion. Thanks, Dindo, also for highlighting these dimensions. Very timely for the community. Yes, it's a deeper dive. Okay, so thank you. Thank you for that, Dr. Julian. There's a question here, I think. Let me read some of the questions that were posted in our Zoom and Facebook Live. Just a minute, I'm trying to access it. Okay, from Forester Celso Diaz of Santa Rosa City, Laguna, Philippines. This is a question for Rafael. Have you conducted an integrated study on the valuation of major ecosystems you have mentioned? For example, provisioning. Rafael?
Thank you. So if by integrated study, it's meant a regional study on all ecosystems, not yet. What we do is really based on nature-based solution projects on a very detailed assessment of ecosystem services. So we actually just yesterday had a discussion with some of our colleagues at headquarters that are part of more the economic group on how to really make sure that we mainstream some systems in terms of identifying natural capital and ecosystem services within the project. So we have done that in some of the project. I think Andrew showed how ecosystem services were really analyzed and a number of data. This is usually, I would say, one of the gaps that we see in terms of really mainstreaming nature-based solution in the region, the lack of evidence on how ecosystem services are at the same level as gray infrastructure services. So if you look at the standard, I think in two criteria 4 and the one on economic feasibility and the one on trade-offs, there's really a recommendation on carrying or implementing cost-benefit analysis. So doing ecosystem services assessments, looking at cost-benefit, making sure that your solution is actually answering your problem and having evidence to support that. And also a comparative analysis between the traditional gray solutions and then the nature-based solution you're proposing. And those are critical indeed to convince government as well that this will work, and also to make sure that we're designing something that will be effective enough. So we do that. The short answer is we do that as part of the project we're implementing. We're supporting our partners also in doing so. And we have some key figures at regional level on mangroves or other large ecosystems on how the type of ecosystem they provide. But it's very important to do a specific assessment on each project and each ecosystem. Mev, if you want to add anything.
Thank you.
Good.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Rafael. There's another question here, but this one is directed to all the panelists from Forester Chris Lomboy of the Philippines. On scaling Liguasan Marsh traditional practices, I wonder if it is assumed that those practices are not yet largely adopted in the area. If it is already the practice, then what would be important to understand to achieve its sustainability is how the adjacent ecosystem could be assisted to make sure that the traditional practices is preserved and sustained. So I think this is more of a question to Mr. Nas. On scaling Liguasan Marsh traditional practices, I wonder if it is assumed that those practices are not yet largely adopted in the area. Mr. Nas? Are you still in the call? I think he lost his internet connection. I'm sorry, I have connection trouble. Yep. Rafael, would you like to?
Hello?
I think Dr. Nas is back online.
Okay, now, Mr. Nas?
Yes.
Okay, would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Okay, on scaling Liguasan Marsh traditional practices, I wonder if it is assumed that those practices are not yet largely adopted in the area.
In terms of practices, this is actually what we want to understand more, if the practices in a certain area is true, because Liguasan Marsh is very large, covering 3 provinces, and we want to because this is a pilot study, we want to understand if for example, the farm trial we had is also true with other marshland community in Liguasan Marsh, or the sustainability indicators that we have. The sustainability indicators that we have can also be used in other marshland community. This is the focus of scaling up. And also scaling up in terms of coverage, in terms of, because what our focus is how the the mushroom farming can be sustainable, or how can it can affect the environment and the livelihood of the community. We want also to scale up in terms of scope of the study, like biodiversity, more on chemical analysis, and check if the reported problems in other areas, such as siltation, the loss of other biodiversity, is caused by farming or other industrial activities in the upstream level of the marsh. So this is what we mean by scaling up, replicating this study, checking if this is true with other communities, and broadening the coverage of the study. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Nas. There's another question here. I think we can still accommodate 2 more questions. For Rafael and Maeve, have you received comments or inputs about the criteria and the respective indicators, especially in M&E mechanisms of programs or interventions? Often this is what is hard to accommodate for program officers, which they have to meet and explain to M&E officers.
So far,
okay, Nats first, okay, and then we go to Rafael and Maeve. Yeah.
As for what we have received comments is from the farmers themselves. The study is participatory, and in terms of modifying the indicators, we consult with the farmers, and even in the scoring method and the course, we discussed this with the farmers, but we didn't receive any comments from the program implementers. But hopefully that can be part of the scaling up of the research project. But for now, what we have is consultations with the farmers in terms of the sustainability assessment. Thank you.
Thank you, Nas. Rafael and Maeve, have you received comments or inputs about the criteria and the respective indicators, especially in M&E mechanisms of programs or interventions? Because often this is what is hard to accommodate for program officers, which they have to meet and explain to M&E officers. Rafael?
I think Maeve.
Hi.
Maeve, okay.
Okay. No, it's fine. We're balancing off between us how to approach this. Yeah, I think there are two levels of this question. One is sort of in the design of the criteria and indicators in the tool itself, which are necessarily very broad and require sort of a level of adaptation depending on the specific intervention or NBS you're looking at, the project that you're looking at. And of course, there was a very broad consultation process on what that suite of indicators should look like when we were designing the tool. That was shared with a number of different key stakeholders and open for input online for many, many months. And as I've mentioned in the governance process for the standard, it will continue to be developed because, again, we can always improve on this tool. And so the input of anybody using the tool is very, very valid. It won't remain static. We have a framework there that can be adapted for individual contextual use, but also we'd be interested to hear feedback from users of the tool in terms of what they think of the suite of criteria and indicators and how we use them. I think Dr. Nas makes a very good point as well in terms of, when it comes to monitoring and evaluation of an individual nature-based solution or project, how do we ensure that it's not just those involved directly in the project that are doing the monitoring and evaluation, but we're including perspectives of direct and indirect beneficiaries of those projects? How are they engaged in the monitoring and evaluation? How are their perspectives captured? And how do those perspectives influence the kinds of indicators we're looking at? So you could want to measure, for example, social economic benefit, and there might be a suite of many different ways of doing that. And I think the selection of indicators or criteria, including those from the perspectives of direct and indirect beneficiaries, is really, really important in M&E processes at a local level.
Okay, thank you, Maeve. There's a follow-up question here. Criteria 4 to 8 covers the socio-economic and governance components of implementing NBS. It's glad to see that these are factored in, as these are often the contested matters when introducing development interventions. Have you experienced some challenges when you introduced the concept of NBS? Was there any resistance from the ground on the communities? How was the balancing of trade-offs explained?
I think, again, this is an iterative process. Those criteria that you mentioned are very intricately linked in that the economic valuation or the cost benefit analysis that we're applying assumes that we have a cost effectiveness study. Again, it's a matter of collecting that right data and evidence base that is then informing the selection or design of the nature-based solution. And we're using the best alternative NBS that we have to hand. So there's a sort of analysis of the different types of solutions that we might be using from an effectiveness and a cost point of view. And then that also, of course, links to the trade-offs concept, because in any investment or intervention, there will always be winners and losers. And the question is to understand very clearly in the short term and in the long term, what does that look like? Who is ultimately needing to sacrifice in the short term, and how can that be managed? And in the long term, once you create successful NBS, they're in a way honeypots of interest, because there's such productive systems that you get different players moving in to take advantage of that. And we see that with traditional systems, right? As soon as you restore a fishery, that goes beyond those locally influenced mechanisms of sustainable use within communities. And you get different players coming in, whether it's with value chains or political power. And then it's a matter of ensuring that that equity of benefit sharing is maintained as the system becomes more productive and more valuable in terms of its benefits. So it's a lot of moving parts. It's the initial investment and the long-term benefits and the insurance that that equity of benefit sharing is maintained. And this is where the governance processes come in. If we have good governance mechanisms where voices are heard and maintained and respected against, government and civil society and even private sector interests, then those are the mechanisms that we're looking at to ensure long-term balancing of those trade-offs in an equitable way. Thank you.
Thank you, Maeve. It's really a long process. I think this is the last question, and I wanted to ask this. Either Rafael or Maeve can respond. Many communities in the Philippines do not have baseline data to serve as basis for monitor or determine evidence of NBS, community-based or indigenous knowledge and practice. How can we overcome this challenge? Can you share indigenous knowledge and practices on baseline research conducted by communities that can be used for NBS?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that, the baseline as we understand them are not only, I would say, hard science, they're also really relying on local knowledge. And a lot of the nature-based solution design will actually be based on local knowledge and practices. I think what nature-based solutions approach do here, they provide a framework for capturing in a systematic way this local knowledge and really making sure that it influences the design of the process. We have several examples on how to engage with local communities and indigenous group on building those local baselines and complementing them with additional research. I think just coming back also to the point that Maeve made on those criteria from 4 to 8 and linked to social and rights issues and possible pushback from some organization. Actually, we had, I would say, major pushback probably at the beginning of nature-based solution from indigenous group that said, we live with nature, we build on nature, our practices are nature-based solution. Expanding that now to the world, to large-scale projects funded by foreign donors will expose us and will kind of threaten also our local practices. And this is why it was very important in the design of the standard to include indigenous people organization in the dialogue, so we can really strengthen all those criteria from 4 to 8 to make sure that they do include respects of rights to land use, or human rights, governance, inclusive governance, and really making sure that local communities, indigenous or not, are not only part of the process, but really driving the process, that the need is identified at their level, that the baselines come from them, and that this is a project that is designed with them, for them, and that they are part in the implementation and monitoring. So a bit of an answer also to the previous question.
Any additional? Yeah.
I'm thinking, just in a really simple answer, when we're looking at nature-based solutions, the predicator of that is that we have a really good understanding of the system as a whole. We understand clearly what the drivers of change are. And I think this goes for the question earlier on Liguas and marsh, is really, as if we're looking at scaling up the practice that's been presented in the case study, and it may be that there are other practices similar to that around the lake, how do we join up these pieces? And what are the key drivers of change that are affecting the marsh system as a whole? And how do we capture those and adapt and define our nature-based solutions and policy influences that can address those things? So again, it's this thing that nothing is static in time, that there'll be good developments, there'll also be pressures coming in, and it's a very mobile and dynamic system that needs to be monitored on a constant level, in a constant way. And also that these monitoring and evaluation systems, assuming we have these baselines and clear understanding of the ecosystems within which we're working, are as simple as possible. It costs money to collect data and analyze data. So how do we streamline it and make sure that we have robust, cost-effective monitoring and evaluation? We would love to be able to do, detailed economic analyses of every aspect of every system. It would be wonderful. But in reality, we need to be very careful as to how we replace our resources for long-term monitoring of these systems that give us that key information we need about change, positive and negative, that we can then adapt our planning accordingly to be able to address those. So simplicity and long-term monitoring for adaptability and change, adaptability in terms of our interventions.
Thank you, May. Very well said. For the benefit of our Facebook audience, we have this, I would just like to share with them this comment from Mr. Eduardo Cablatini. He said, very good 8 criteria system. In a way, watershed and landscape-oriented multi-sectoral initiatives are using several of the criteria, but weak on criteria 4, economic, and 6, balance and trade-offs. We hope to spark the dialogue on the MBS standards among the increasing local watershed networks in the Philippines through the Philippine Watershed Management Coalition. Thank you. Salamat po for the information. Thank you for the information, says Mr. Eduardo Cablatin. Thank you also for your comments, sir. I think that wraps up our Q&A. This has been a very engaging online conversation. We now call on the program head of SEARCA's Research and Thought Leadership Department, Dr. Pedcris Orencio, for his closing remarks and the ways forward. Sir Ped?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Sir Ped.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I would like to first commend the session presenters for sharing with us the various ways nature-based solutions could address the various challenges that societies are currently facing. Well, these challenges delimit not only optimizing the benefits of ecosystem services, but also the achievement of societal security and development. The presentations have actually helped us in recognizing the opportunities of dealing with the issues and attaining development objectives by effectively applying nature-based solutions. So in this webinar, NBS was presented both as a tool and as an approach for addressing complex and interconnected problems of various systems. NBS, as described, are actions to protect, sustainably manage, and restore natural modified systems that address societal challenges effectively and adaptively, simultaneously providing human well-being and biodiversity benefits. But still, I guess one question that merits an answer is how do we harness the effectiveness of NBS? Listening from our colleagues from IUCN, I think it is important to understand how to develop the pathways that would achieve sustainable management and use of natural ecosystems through activities that aim to safeguard, restore, maintain, ensure the services and intended functions. Humans are naturally dependent on natural resources for survival and development, but are also prone to tragedy due to their open access nature. No? A strategic move, therefore, is to develop that collective responsibility to uphold normative conditions for resources availability and utility by individuals, groups, and organizations, and across scales. But it is important to do this right. No? Hence, the IUCN NBS tools and standards would matter much in setting the perspectives so that our efforts would be effectively contributing to our shared goals and objectives for sustainability. Developing the pathways could be actually daunting given the complexity of the conditions we are facing. Hence, it would be worthwhile to characterize the nature of the challenge to both biodiversity and humans, determine the accompanying risk and conflicts and trade-offs, as well as to put into context the prevailing policy and environment for activities concerning both systems. In SEARCA's 11th five-year plan, which started last year, we aim to elevate the quality of life of agricultural families through sustainable and resilient livelihoods and access to modern networks and innovative markets. But making the most of NBS, we could develop strategies that will enhance and complement these innovative technologies and promote balanced growth and development across systems and sectors of society. In SEARCA, we steer and facilitate the transformation of key agricultural and rural development partners at various scales could directly influence the transformation of our major stakeholders, which are basically the farmers, through research, capacity development, and knowledge generation. Well, this brings me to my last point, which is to continuously promote and advocate NBS at various levels. The knowledge coming out from the exercise, particularly those that demonstrated the benefits, should be packaged and disseminated, as they are keys to further adoption and application. This will add to the evidences that will in turn support the formulation of policies that promote NBS and designing programs that can be mainstreamed across systems. Continuous monitoring and evaluation systems, however, should be established to improve the process and determine transformational innovations that will further address socio-environmental challenges at local, national, and regional levels. By conducting this webinar, we are already a step ahead in filling in that knowledge gap on NBS and started building that community of practice at different levels and scales. So at this point, I would like to thank IUCN for this partnership, to our presenters who enthusiastically provided their knowledge, to SEARCA's P4DU led by Dr. Nova Ramos for organizing and facilitating this event. The workshop was also nicely moderated thanks to Ms. Kim. To everyone who attended this webinar, may you become a platform for using and spreading the word about NBS and their contributions to address the current and future societal challenges. Thank you very much and stay safe.
Thank you very much, Sir Ped. I echo Sir Ped's gratitude, endless gratitude to our speakers, Rafael and May, for sharing with us their expertise. And yes, definitely we have learned a lot from the work that you have been doing towards a common understanding of nature-based solutions. Thank you also to our case presenters, Andrew and Mr. Nas, for demonstrating to us how nature-based solutions can be integrated or mainstreamed into research projects. We realize that there are a lot of things to do in terms of bringing the concept of NBS into our work and mobilizing the support that we need to advance this program, this approach. So that ends our webinar this morning. But before we close, please let us know what you think about this webinar by following the link to a quick feedback form shown on your screen. So the same link will direct you to the request form for the e-certificate. Your feedback is important to us. It will help us improve our online learning events. And so kindly wait for your e-certificate to be issued within 30 working days because of the numerous requests for e-certificates that we receive for our webinars. Thank you also for your understanding and patience. Please join us again for our next online conversation tomorrow, Wednesday, November 24 at 10 o'clock in the morning with the theme Transformational Leadership for Agricultural and Rural Development, the 37th SOLVE webinar titled Solve Leadership Challenges, Redefining Effective Leaders for Tomorrow will feature SEARCA senior fellows, namely Dr. Emerlinda R. Roman, Professor Emeritus and former President of the University of the Philippines, Dr. Tin Tut, retired Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock and Irrigation, Myanmar, and Dr. Howard Boyce, Emeritus Fellow, International Food Policy Research Institute, and founding director of Harvest Plus, IFRI, Washington, D.C., USA. Professor Joselito Florendo, SEARCA's Deputy Director for Administration, will serve as moderator. On Thursday, November 25 at 10 in the morning, we will also have the Alumni Forum on Transformational Leadership as part of SEARCA's 55th anniversary celebration, organized by SEARCA's Graduate Scholarship and Institutional Development Unit, ECLD, in collaboration with the Regional SEARCA Alumni Association, or RSAA. The Alumni Forum features selected SEARCA Scholarship alumni as panel discussants, namely Dr. Wirapon Thongma, President of Majo University, Thailand, Dr. Asikin Yu, Undersecretary of the State of the Minister of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries, Cambodia, and Mr. Natalino Babo Martins, Deputy Project Manager of Global Environment Facility Project, Conservation International, Timor-Leste. They will share their experiences and reflections on what it takes to be a transformational leader, especially in this time of the pandemic. Another scholarship alumna, Dr. Shirley Baroga Hamias, Professor, UPLB College of Development Communication, will serve as moderator. Before we finally end this webinar, I would like to invite our online attendees again to participate in a short poll, which is in line with SEARCA's celebration of its 55th anniversary this month. So the survey question again is, in one word, how will you describe SEARCA's role in building institutional capacities and human resources development on agricultural and rural development in Southeast Asian region? Send us your thoughts again by visiting the link www.menti.com and enter the code 5413627. So some of the answers that we see, are you able to flash that on screen, Odette? Okay. So the words that came out are excellent. The big words are excellent, important, champion, relevant. Okay. And other words are transformational, significant, good, sturdy, awareness, connections, progressive, championing, and challenging. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone, for participating in this short poll. Okay, so on behalf of SEARCA, led by our director, Dr. Glenn Gregorio, we would like to express our sincere gratitude to IUCN, led by Dr. Dinto Campilan, for all the support and for making this webinar on NBS possible. We also thank our online attendees for taking the time to join us today. It has been a pleasure to have you all with us this morning. Let us help one another get through this COVID-19 pandemic and win the fight against all these environmental challenges that we are experiencing right now. SEARCA joins the global community in championing the vital role of nature in addressing the impacts of all these environmental challenges. We hope that as we go along, we will be able to create a community of better, bigger, smarter farmers and farming communities as SEARCA strives at 55, as SEARCA at 55 strives to 60. This is Kim Bantayan of SEARCA. Stay healthy, stay safe, enjoy the rest of the day. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Maeve. Thank you, Rafael. Thank you, Vanessa, also.
How much do you love nature? Do you remember your first walk in a forest? Your first swim in the ocean? The first time you saw a wild animal? We all love nature. We all depend on nature. More than 40% of the world's oxygen comes from rainforests. 50% of chemical medicines are based on nature. 100% of our food comes from nature. Are we taking this for granted? We need nature to sustain us. IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, is the world's largest global environmental network created in 1948. Together, we're working in more than 160 countries for a just world that values and conserves nature. With over 1,000 staff, more than 1,200 member organizations, including governments and NGOs, and almost 11,000 volunteer scientists and experts. Together, we gather the latest knowledge on biodiversity, assessing the status of species, and protecting our natural wonders. We run hundreds of field projects around the world, such as managing water resources, restoring forests, protecting our coasts and oceans, and helping companies improve their environmental performance. We are nature's voice on the international stage. At the IUCN World Conservation Congress, at the United Nations General Assembly, at international environmental negotiations. By investing in solutions offered by nature, we can address today's global challenges. Together, we can stop the extinction of plants and animals, help fight climate change, restore natural resources, boost food security, and reduce poverty. When nature is healthy, our communities, economies, and countries prosper. Together, let's stand up for nature to create a better future for all of us. Join us now. How much